your emotions can confidence yet in all your might and glory vanished from the sky. Just another story. Mystery, man-made love. They know how it fell from the sky.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas, and my guest today is Pete. Is it Thottam?
Yeah, PeteThottam.
Thottam. Okay. Yeah. And got your website up. That's Pete, PeteThottam.com. Tell me a little bit about you, Peter. Obviously, you're on my show because you're trying to do something. You're trying to make a difference. Haven't you run for office?
I ran for assembly this year on the Democratic Party ticket here in Southern California, West LA, which is basically Venice, Mar Vista, down to Torrance in the South Bay. And I got about 2,000 votes, and it was the most competitive race in California in terms of the state assembly. I was one of 8 Democrats running, and I got about 2,000 votes. Each one of the Democrats would be better than I did. Spent over $500,000 on their election campaign. I ran a self-finance campaign less than $70,000, and ran a campaign talking about the real issues as opposed to the BS that you get from most of the machine or money beholden politicians here and throughout most of the country. Anyway, I can talk more about that later if you'd like.
All right, you're a Democrat. The Democratic Party hasn't been in too much favor in the patriot communities and the patriot movement, but tell me about that. I've always kind of been a George Wallace fan. There's not a dime's worth of difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. Yeah. On the upper end, you know, it's like both two wings of the same bird, and a bird's a global vulture, not a eagle that's free. What's your opinion? What's wrong? What's wrong with the parties? What's wrong with America? What are you running for? What do you see, and what do you see as the problem?
I left the Democratic Party back in 2002 because of the pending Iraq War at the time. I only came back a couple of years ago. The reality is, in my district, there's a 14 percentage point registration lead over the Republican Party. The Libertarians and the Greens and the Peace and Freedom third parties, they've lost membership. It's impossible to actually win office. So, in terms of the Democrats versus Republicans, like a lot of other people, you know, if I had my druthers, there could be no party system. It's mostly a construct of the wealthy elites in this country to create the illusion of a functioning democracy. The two parties, at least as far as the national level goes, are completely beholden to Wall Street. You go to Congress, you'll see that right away. There are 5, just in the financial industry alone, there are 5 lobbyists for every member of the House of Representatives. In Sacramento, here in California, you see the same sort of thing. You see in Sacramento there are 120 Assembly and Senate legislative members. There are 2,300 lobbyists. They offer directly over 70%, or indirectly or directly over 70% of the legislation that gets done. So again, the parties are mostly a construct of the media. You know, the red states. I mean, it's not what it was 50 years ago. It's not what it was, certainly 200 years ago. In terms of my personal beliefs, there are a growing number of issues where I strongly lean libertarian, and I'm certainly far more focused on fiscal responsibility and not kicking the can down the road than your typical Democrat. But again, I've reached a point because of my activism, Clay, over the last 10 years or over the last 8 years, with the impeachment movement against Bush Cheney, with the 9/11 Truth movement, with government reform efforts, where I've stopped thinking in terms of left and right and Democrat versus Republican. Those are pigeonhole boxes that the media creates to warp the way people look at issues.
The oldest maxim in warfare is divide and conquer. And we've got our founding fathers knew what was coming. They warned us about that. If you ever allow a private bank to issue your money, they and the corporations that spring up around them will leave your children homeless in the land that we conquered. Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, and that's unfolded since 1913, since the Federal Reserve was created. Essentially, you have bankers calling the shots in terms of CNN, in terms of the takedown of different politicians, whether it's Elliott Spitzer or
James Traficant, for instance.
Politicians. So William, say it again.
James Traficant, for instance, politician they took down.
Yeah, well, there are dozens of them. Anytime you deviate significantly from what the machine wants in terms of legislation, especially when you actually are going to have an effect on the outcome of something at a national level, especially, you'll see stories pop up, and everyone has a way to be got into, and people, most Americans don't realize how completely upside down and warped the media has become in this country. It's not a media; it's a propaganda system. It's a system where you have a bunch of highly paid talking heads, Anderson Cooper to everyone. Everyone.
Even
multi-million-dollar companies.
Even Pat Buchanan. I've had Pat Buchanan on my show several times. Asked him about the Federal Reserve. He didn't he didn't know about the Federal Reserve. I said, well, you could have asked your one of your best friends, G. Edward Griffin, about the creature who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island. You could have asked him, Pat. And I asked him once. I said, why, Pat? Why would you? How could you do that show for so many years and not walk around the table and just slap the hell out of Bill Press, the liberal that he was his counterpart? And he said, well, Ted Turner paid me a lot of money not to. And I said, well, thank you, Pat. I think you've answered all of my questions. Thank you for being on my show.
I don't watch Buchanan as much as I used to. I used to watch him. Frankly, I don't watch television that much anymore. But O'Reilly, Anderson Cooper, Wolf Blitzer, Sean Hannity, all these guys make they make multi-million-dollar contracts. And at the end of the day, they're controlling media stations dictate to a large extent the way they cover things and what they cover. A lot of it's driven by market share, business dynamics, but a lot of it is pure politics.
Well, let me address that for go. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What?
I was just going to say, Griffin and Eustace Mullins and all these guys, who have written books on the Federal Reserve and who have commented and given speeches. I mean, they're hitting the nail on the head. What has happened here in the United States is that the British and the European bankers / New York bankers have effectively managed over the last 50 years and arguably over the last 100 years to take over the media and political systems of the country, and increasingly other systems too. You've got a wealthy elite around the world that's basically running the show. They're divided. They've got factions too, but they have common interests. And in this country in particular, there's been a major dumbing down of the mainstream media. Most people are out to lunch and have no idea what the hell's going on in their local communities in terms of politics. There's no sense of, this is around the country. Now, the Tea Party movement and other responses to what's going on are legitimate